Traveling through the three kingdoms, he became Lu Bu, and the beginning was a life and death crisis. See how Lu Bu washes away his former shame and changes his destiny against the heavens. Holding the system to threaten the emperor, conquering feudal lords, and creating one's own magnificent hegemony. Main characters: LV Bu, Cao Cao, Cao Ang, Chen Gong. Keywords of the novel. Three Kingdoms. Showdown, IMLU Bu no pop-ups, Three Kingdoms. Showdown, IMLU Bu complete collection download, Three Kingdoms. Showdown, IMLU Bu latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. I became LV Bu. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The bright moonlight shines into the capital of the Han Dynasty, Luoyang. This ancient city, which has witnessed countless vicissitudes, is filled with a strong sense of solemnity under the moonlight. Not far from the city, there stands an endless barracks, with solemn expressions on the faces of each armored soldier. A big flag with the character, Ding, is slowly fluttering in the wind. In the handsome tent, Tao Qian held a long sword in his hand and stared at the gradually cooled corpse across the table, his brows and eyes filled with sorrow. What should I do? Tao Qian is a traveler. One moment he was still fighting against drug dealers, but the next moment he arrived at the end of the Han Dynasty in the romance. It's okay to come to the end of Han Dynasty, but who are you bad for? Unfortunately, you became Lu Bu. But it's useless to complain about it now. Everything has its own destiny. From this moment on, I had a showdown, and I was Lu Bu. He is really not happy about the current situation. He killed someone. The deceased was none other than his adoptive father, Ding Yuan, the governor of Bingzhou. General He Jin invited the governor of Western Liang, Dongzhou, and the governor of Bingzhou, Ding Yuan, to enter the court to suppress the 10 constant attendants. Dongzhou took the lead in entering the capital and, taking advantage of both the 10 constant attendants and He Jin being defeated, directly controlled the court situation, gathered their troops, and supported 200,000 soldiers with great momentum. Dongzhou, a highly respected minister, planned to take advantage of this opportunity to strengthen his influence and take the action of abolishing the throne. Ding Yuanwen of Bingzhou led his army to attack, but his adopted son LV Bu was very powerful, and Dongzhou was defeated. Under his command, Li Su requested to use red rabbits and horses as bait to force LV Bu to defect and defect. Fragments kept flashing through Tao Qian's mind, then he looked at the sword in his hand. It's already too late, although I don't know if I killed Ding Yuan myself, but Ding Yuan is already dead. The people of the Han Dynasty placed great emphasis on loyalty and filial piety. The act of an adopted son killing his father can be said to be a matter of incompatibility between heaven and earth. Since I have become LV Bu, I cannot step into the abyss and self-destruct. If we continue the old path of LV Bu, we may not be able to change the fate of hanging the White Gate Tower in the end. In the dimly lit tent, a pair of pupils peered through the curtain and gazed into the magnificent city, with a bitter smile on the corners of their mouths. At present, even if he has unparalleled martial arts skills, he is just the chief clerk under Ding Yuan's command, in charge of the army's money and food. Even if Dongzhou tends to intimidate and allows him to lead the army, the war may be a bit calm, and he will eventually be shackled and become someone else's minion. Instead of being constantly constrained by others, it's better to break the deadlock and change one's destiny against the heavens. What may seem easy is not easy without an opportunity. Young man, it's getting late. Dong Gong is still waiting for your reply. Outside the tent, there came a man's voice. Upon hearing this, Lu Bu's black pupils flashed with a brilliant light. Li Su. Someone gave me a pillow just as I was about to doze off. Now that Ding Yuan has died, the military power in Bingzhou is vacant. As Ding Yuan's adopted son, I am also a flying general in Bingzhou. If the highest official in the military is Ding Yuan, then the most authoritative person is undoubtedly only himself. With this title alone, it is enough to help him seize the power of Bingzhou. But Lu Bu doesn't want to carry the name of patricide behind his back, and Li Su is precisely the opportunity to change everything. "Brother, come on in." As the words fell, a thin man dressed in light blue Confucian attire walked into the tent. Seeing the situation inside, his pupils suddenly shrank. Under the dim lights, Lu Bu, holding a short sword and unable to see any emotions, came into view. Next to Lu Bu, there was Ding Yuan, who had already died and could no longer die. Although Lu Bu did not speak, his every word and action was filled with an indescribable sense of oppression in the air. Seeing this expression on Lu Bu's face, Li Su's heart trembled, and a smile forced out of his mouth. He arched his hand and approached, saying, "My wise brother has made this great contribution today. When he returns to Luoyang, Dong Gong will definitely be of great importance. I hope that in the future, when he is appointed as a marquis or general, he will not forget what my foolish brother has instructed him today." Lu Bu's narrowed eyes instantly widened, and in an instant, a stronger aura rushed forward, causing Li Su, who had rushed in, to stiffen and feel embarrassed. I was also somewhat shocked in my heart. Previously, when we met, Bu treated him as if he had been in the past, and when we talked, we treated each other with great courtesy. But in just one stick of incense, when I saw him again, I felt a bit unfamiliar and even scared. Brother just said, "What position does Dong Gong intend to bestow upon me?" Before his arrival, Duke Dong once said that if his wise younger brother was willing to abandon the dark and turn to the light, he would be appointed as a cavalry captain, a lieutenant general, and all the troops and horses in Yongliang would be handed over to his wise younger brother for command. Upon hearing this, Lu Bu's face suddenly showed an angry expression, and a cold light gradually flickered in his indifferent pupils. I, Lu Bu, have been his henchman for so long. So, shouldn't I become his henchman again, at his mercy? Seeing Lu Bu's sudden change in tone, Li Su's heart also trembled, and a cold sweat broke out from his back. His pupils also began to dodge slightly. Does Feng Xian want to break his oath? Now that Ding Yuan is dead, there is no way back. If Feng Xian wants to go back on his promise at this moment, it may be too late. Moreover, betraying his promise is not the fault of a great man. I hope that for the sake of all the people in the world, Feng Xian cannot refuse Dong Gong's solicitation. Lu Bu suddenly laughed and said, "Speak of people when you see them, speak of ghosts when you see them." Dong Zhuo was originally a traitor of the Han dynasty, and how could he say that he would betray his faith and betray such a despicable person? Li Su saw that Lu Bu had decided to go back on his word, and his face was dull. After a moment, he said, "Since that's the case, I don't have much to say. I'll take my leave." "Wait a minute." Lu Bu dodged and stopped Li Su. The sharp blade in hand flickered with cold light under the candlelight. "What do you want to do?" Li Su felt uneasy at this situation and instinctively took a step back. Lu Bu raised his lips slightly and smiled, saying, "Brother and I are also old acquaintances. Now that brother is in a high position and has achieved great success, Bu is still in a state of despair and lacks a foothold. He really has no face to face. If you want to ask brother for something, please don't refuse." What is it?" "Your head." After speaking, Lu Bu waved his arm and Li Su immediately fell to the ground with his head. Ding! Binding in progress. Congratulations to the host, who changed his destiny against the heavens and successfully bound the invincible bonus system. In the depths of Lu Bu's brain, a cold mechanical sound suddenly sounded. Invincible bonus system. After the sound disappeared, information about the invincible bonus system automatically appeared in the depths of Lu Bu's mind. According to the system description, there are 3 types of attribute points in the bonus system. 1 is to obtain basic attribute points by completing regular tasks or killing heroes with single attribute points below 90. 1 is an all-around attribute point that can only be obtained by killing heroes with a single attribute higher than 90 points or completing specific tasks, the last type is a special attribute point that can only be obtained by changing the original historical event. Moreover, the first attribute point can only be used on heroes with attributes below 90 points, the second attribute point can be used not only on heroes with attributes below 100 points, but also on internal affairs and technology, and the third attribute point can be used freely without any restrictions. Ding! The host changes the original historical trajectory and rewards one special attribute point. Please check. Ding! For the first time the host enters the system, there are 2 reward attribute points. Please check. Ding! The host kills Li Su and rewards 1 attribute point. Please check. Entering the interface, what catches the eye is LV Bu's personal information. Lu Bu, 100 in force, 38 in intelligence, 82 in command, and 41 in internal affairs. My intelligence is a bit low. This is Lu Bu's first reaction. But at the moment, he only has 1 special attribute point, and even if it is applied to force, it may not have much effect. After much thought, it's better to keep it for now and be prepared. Exit the interface. The 2 corpses in the big tent are already so cold that they cannot be further cooled. Looking at his masterpiece, Lu Bu's mouth slightly raised, picked up the long sword that had fallen from the ground, and without hesitation, he made a few strokes towards his arm before finally piercing his lower abdomen fiercely. Although the blade was cold, at this moment, Lu Bu's heart was particularly hot. Because from this moment on, his life had just begun. At the moment of falling to the ground, Lu Bu shouted loudly, "Assassin, there is an assassin, come quickly." Chapter 2. Control of the Bingzhou Army. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The sky is gradually brightening, but the mansion where General He once entered is still brightly lit. In the lobby, Dong Zhuo looked expectant and his eyes kept gazing out of the mansion. On his side, a blue-clad scholar appeared much more composed. Do you really think LV Bu will come? Upon hearing this question asked by Dong Zhuo countless times, Li Ru still smiled elegantly and said softly, "Don't worry, father.in.law. Even if it doesn't work out, Li Su's appearance will inevitably create a rift between the father and son of Ding Yuan and LV Bu. If my son.in.law tries any tricks, they will definitely be in the hands of my father.in.law. As long as Ding Yuan dies, both LV Bu and the Bingzhou army will be in his hands." Haha. Upon hearing Li Ru's words, Dong Zhuo laughed heartily and looked out with hopeful eyes. After waiting for a moment, Zhang Ji's figure suddenly appeared in sight. Although the person who came was not Li Su, Dong Zhuo couldn't control so much and directly asked, "Has Li Su come back?" Zhang Ji bowed and clasped his fists, saying, "When the last general was patrolling in the morning, he suddenly noticed a head hanging above the gate of the Bingzhou army. Upon careful identification, he realized that it was actually Li Zhonglang." "What, you said Li Su is dead?" Upon hearing the news, Dong Zhuo angrily patted the table, his eyebrows arched, his facial features twisted into a ball, and he looked like he was about to devour people. If a child saw him, he would probably cry in fear. The last general dared not lie, he was indeed the leader of Li Zhonglang. Moreover, not only that, white flags were hung throughout the entire Bingzhou military camp, and there seemed to be cries inside. Upon hearing that Dong Zhuo had lost both Li Su and BMW, his anger was burning at the moment. After a moment, he let out a long sigh and said unwillingly, "I treat Lu Bu so kindly. Why is he unwilling to surrender to me? Our family is unwilling to accept it." Seeing Dong Zhuo's long sigh, Li Ru asked, "General Zhang, are you sure that white flags are flying throughout the entire Bingzhou military camp?" "I will dare to guarantee with the head of the person above me. It's broken." Li Ru shouted with a surprised expression on his face. Even Dong Zhuo next to him was somewhat surprised by such a loss of composure. "What's wrong?" "Lord, it seems that we underestimated LV Bu. According to Confucian speculation, Ding Yuan may have died in LV Bu's hands at this moment. However, LV Bu's gang blamed us for killing Ding Yuan. In order to avoid being discovered, he killed Li Su completely without any evidence. Now that the Bingzhou army is leaderless and everyone hates us, they will inevitably rely on LV Bu. I'm afraid the Bingzhou army will soon fall into LV Bu's hands. What? Dong Zhuo's face suddenly changed, with a murderous aura. For Dong Zhuo, if it is as Li Ru guessed, then it is true that stealing a chicken will not erode the rice. Don't worry, my lord. At the moment, we can take advantage of the instability of Lu Bu's foundation to cut off their retreat. Then we can recruit them. If the Bingzhou army lacks food and supplies, they will definitely surrender voluntarily. At that time, my lord will surely win 50,000 soldiers from Bingzhou. Looking at Li Ru with a confident expression on his face, Dong Zhuo suddenly realized and laughed heartily, saying, I have a wise son. Lol. Why worry about not achieving great success? The sky suddenly changed color, and dark clouds covered the sunlight on the sky. For a moment, the earth was filled with a gloomy color. At this time, the Bingzhou camp outside Luoyang city is a true reflection of the weather. In the handsome tent, all the generals had a gloomy expression on their faces, and the leader, Lu Bu, was wrapped around a white cloth with a gloomy expression and remained silent. Last night, Dong Zhuo sent Li Su to negotiate on the surface, but secretly carried out assassination. Lord LV Bu, the chief clerk, although he killed Li Su, he was defeated by the assassin. He was seriously injured and even the governor, Lord Ding Yuan, died in a pool of blood. The former confidants of Ding Yuan below are also in a daze at this moment, with different expressions. Duke Ding has passed away, and Lord LV is Duke Ding's adopted son. I think it is most appropriate for a son to inherit his father's legacy. Do you have any objections? Wei Su, the brother-in-law of Lu Bu, proposed first. Zhang Liao, the last general, agreed. General Gao Shun also believes that the current situation must be handled by Mr. LV. Yes, Cao Xing also believes that it is necessary for Master LV. The four closest generals to LV Bu in the large tent directly swore allegiance, while the other generals looked at each other and dared not speak much. They all knelt down on one knee and shouted in unison, "We are willing to follow Chief LV." Lu Bu did not show any signs of joy. His gaze swept over everyone and finally fell on the four people at the front. Unlike others, these four were the most trusted generals in Ding Yuan's daily life, and each held military power. In terms of status, qualifications, and power, they are all above Lu Bu. The biggest threat to Lu Bu after Ding Yuan's death is probably the four people in front of him. Lu Bu quickly used the system to check the attributes of the four people one by one. Zhang Lin, Force 71, Intelligence 35, Command 61, Politics 39, Loyalty 0. LV Fei, 72 in Strength, 38 in Intelligence, 65 in Command, 34 in Politics, and 0 in Loyalty. Chen Gong, 70 in Force, 49 in Intelligence, 64 in Command, 47 in Politics, and 10 in Loyalty. He Kai, 71 in Force, 45 in Intelligence, 67 in Command, 48 in Politics, and 30 in Loyalty. Indeed, he has no loyalty to himself, a pile of miscellaneous things. A cold light flashed deep in Lu Bu's eyes, and his inner passion was suppressed once again. He took a deep breath and slowly stood up, saying, "My adoptive father died at the hands of a traitor." As an adopted son, Lu Bu cannot seek revenge for his adoptive father, which is truly unfilial. All you have requested is for Lu Bu to be grateful in his heart, but unfortunately, his position is humble and he cannot take on this great responsibility. I hope that you generals can find someone else to inherit the throne. The chief clerk is the adopted son of Duke Ding, and it is reasonable to inherit the throne. This is not only the request of the last general, but also the request of the soldiers of the three armies. I hope that the chief clerk LV will not refuse and will take charge of the army from now on. Wei Su knelt down on one knee and begged earnestly. When he cried, Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and others beside him immediately pleaded with great understanding. Lubu had injuries on his body and it was not easy to assist him. He stood there with a look of resentment and helplessness, shouting loudly, "Your actions are trapping me in injustice. If the general repeatedly refuses, it will be the misfortune of us and the soldiers of Bingzhou," said Zhang Liaoyi sternly. Watching them boasting about themselves one by one, these four military commanders could no longer bear to watch. One of them pointed to these people and cursed, "What are you doing? We are the military commanders personally appointed by Governor Ding. He is just a chief clerk, how can we control the army? In terms of quality and ability, it should be us. When will it be his turn to be a descendant of Lu Bu? Nonsense, you should be beheaded." Wei Su conjured up a knife from somewhere and directly attacked the four people. For a moment, a mournful cry rang out from within the large tent. On the brown soil flowed hot blood, and four headless corpses lay on the cold ground. The rest of the people in the tent also had a chilling expression on their faces. "What are you? What are you doing?" Lu Bu looked at the four corpses that were gradually cooling down and cried bitterly. "Whoever disturbs our military morale, no matter how high their position is, the last general and others will also be executed," Wei Su said and scanned the crowd present. Zhang Liao raised his fist and said, "This is the end of the matter. I hope General doesn't hesitate anymore and will inherit the position of Duke Ding tomorrow. General LV is expected to inherit the position of Duke Ding." The generals inside the tent knelt on the ground, and the sound of armor rubbing against the ground also sounded. Seeing everyone yield, LV Bu's face showed a faint smile. With a long sigh, he said, "Since you have invited me, it's not easy for Bu to continue to decline. I hope you can work together to assist Lu Bu in sweeping out the traitors and supporting the Han dynasty." "Sweep away the traitors and support the Han dynasty," the generals shouted in unison. LV Bu nodded slightly, and an unprecedented sense of pride emerged in his heart. Today's scene was truly unexpected to him. Originally, he only gave a hint to Wei Su, but he didn't expect Wei Su to be quite clever. He actually reacted and cooperated with himself to perform the play well, eliminating all four obstructed captains. Without them, the power of Bingzhou can truly fall into one's own hands. Just as Lu Bu was immersed in the joy of taking power, a soldier quickly broke through the camp and bowed, saying, "General, Dongzhuo's army has captured Mengjin. Now, all four gates are coming out and are attacking us." Chapter 3. First Battle Enemy Army. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Under the city of Luoyang, the two armies are in front of each other, with flags flying in the air in a deadly aura. Under the flag of Bingzhou, LV Bu was dressed in a beast-faced swallowing head chain armor, with a slender lion mane belt tied around his waist. He wore a purple gold crown with 3 forked hair, and a blood-red Sichuan red scarf and a 100-flower robe hung horizontally on his shoulder. A white cloth was tied to his forehead as a sign of mourning. Not only him, but also Zhang Liao and others on both sides are like this. The 100,000 strong army of Dongzhuo, wielding weapons and spears like a jungle. Dongzhuo rode on a western young steed, dressed in golden armor, with a face full of flesh and a needle-like beard on his chin. His old tiger eyes stared fixedly at the distant army of Bingzhou. Although Dong Jun had taken the old path of the Bingzhou army, the soldiers in danger did not show any timidity when facing the strong enemy. On the contrary, everyone showed sadness and anger, and the air was filled with a sense of solemnity. Although the battle has not yet begun, the soldiers of both armies are already at a loss, their eyes turning red. Lu Bu quickly opened the system interface, hoping to further enhance his own strength before the battle. Zhang Liao, 96 in strength, 89 in intelligence, 95 in command, 78 in politics, and 99 in loyalty. Gao Shun, 89 in strength, 81 in intelligence, 90 in command, 67 in politics, and 100 in loyalty. Wei Su, 74 in strength, 70 in intelligence, 67 in command, 73 in politics, and 100 in loyalty. Cao Xing, 76 in strength, 68 in intelligence, 69 in command, and 70 in politics. Loyalty 95. After some thought, Lvbu first added a regular attribute point to Gao Shun's martial arts, and then looked at Wei Su and Cao Xing, feeling that there was no need for them to take action. Suggest the host to enhance the special skills of General Cao Xing. The cold sound of the system suddenly came from Lu Bu's brain. Special skills. Upon careful examination, Lu Bu realized that there is also a skill bar behind the general attribute. It's just that I was too focused on attributes before, so I didn't notice it. Galaxy Archer. When using bows and arrows, there is a lower chance of hitting the enemy's crucial position. Upgradable, Lu Bu used an attribute point upwards and his original skill also changed. Galaxy Archer. When using bows and arrows, there is a certain chance to hit the enemy's crucial position. Upgradable, upon seeing this, Lu Bu became ruthless and directly threw in the last attribute point. Galaxy Archer. When using bows and arrows, there is a higher chance of hitting the enemy's crucial position. Already top. Level, very good. Although 2 attribute points were used consecutively, this skill was suddenly elevated to the top level, making Cao Xing no longer just a soy sauce, but a terrifying weapon around him. Although the accumulated attribute points were empty, Lvbu believes that this investment is still worth it. Ding! The strength of Cao Xing under the host's command has been improved. Currently, his strength is 80, intelligence is 68, commander is 69, politics is 70, and loyalty is 100. Facing the army formation, Dongzhuo lightly kowtowed his horse's belly and slowly moved forward, pointing his whip at the Bingzhou army formation and cursing loudly, "Lubu Pifu, our family sees that you are a talented person, so we sent people to persuade you well. But you not only do not repent, but also dare to kill the imperial officials. Now, by the decree of the emperor, I will lead a large army to eliminate you, this treacherous traitor." Lubu was also unwilling to be outdone. He held Fang Tianhua's halberd and pointed it at Dongzhuo in response, saying, "Rogue, my adoptive father Ding Yuan has no grievances or enmity with you. You have sent someone to assassinate him first, and now you are here shouting to catch a thief. If I don't kill you to avenge my father, I will really do something wrong to my ancestors." After speaking, Lvbu rode out and prepared to attack and kill Dongzhuo. Dongzhuo remained calm and unhurried, directly taking off the precious bow that had accompanied him for decades from behind. The golden arrow was carved with a giant dragon with its teeth and claws, and its image was extremely fierce. Hitting a golden arrow, he slowly pulled the long bow with his arms full of strength. A fierce momentum surged out of Dongzhuo's body in an instant. Even Lvbu, who was 100 steps away, was somewhat surprised at the moment. Dongzhuo surprisingly knows martial arts. At this moment, Dongzhuo is no longer the seemingly bloated old man, but a true warrior galloping on the battlefield. Back then, Dongzhuo used this bow to shoot and kill the king of Chang among the thousands of soldiers, and his power hung westward, only then did he secure the throne of Liangzhou. Nowadays, although I am old, with arrows in my hand, I still have the same charm as before. The arrow flew out quickly and headed straight into Lu Bu's face. Lvbu quickly used all his strength and picked up the flying arrow with his halberd. The force attached to the arrow instantly transmitted to him, and the previously self-harmed wound also burst open due to the excessive movement. Lubu let out a muffled snort and furrowed his brows slightly. Although Dongzhuo was obese and cruel, he never expected to be a formidable general. If this arrow were normal, he would naturally not be afraid, but there are injuries under the eyes and on the body, which really take some effort. But Dong Zhuo across from him was not aware of Lu Bu's difficulties. Seeing that an arrow could not be shot as desired, he couldn't help but laugh angrily and said, "You truly deserve to be the vanguard. If you can escape under our arrow, you may still be the first." After speaking, Dong Zhuo took out his second arrow from his own pouch and placed it on the bowstring, shouting, "Eat another arrow from our family." As soon as the words fell, a shooting star-like arrow quickly shot over. With no choice but to retreat, Lu Bu could only clamp his horse's belly with his legs and forcefully catch the arrow with Fang Tianhua's halberd. I never expected that the power of this arrow would far surpass that of the first arrow. Even the red hare horse couldn't withstand this tremendous force and took a step back before standing firm. Nausea. The strength just dissipated, and a mouthful of blood spurted out from LV Bu's mouth. General. The generals around Bingzhou all looked worried when they saw this. LV Bu has injuries on his body, they are aware of it. If you want to blame him, you have to blame Dong Zhuo for being despicable. First, he sent out assassins to assassinate him, and now, taking advantage of LV Bu's injuries, he used arrows to injure people. This is clearly bullying people. Dong Zhuo saw that both arrows had failed, so he took out a third arrow from his quiver and placed it on the bowstring, saying, "If you can take another arrow from our family, we'll let you go today." As soon as he spoke, in the Bingzhou army formation, Cao Xing quickly took off the black long bow hanging from the horse's neck, and then slowly pulled a long arrow, staring coldly at Dong Zhuo. The two armies are engaged in a bow and arrow battle in front of each other. The air was filled with murderous aura, and the soldiers had a solemn expression on their faces. They looked straight at both sides of the duel and forgot everything. Dong Zhuo squinted his eyes and gritted his teeth, saying, "How brave! How dare you compete with our family in archery?" Cao Xing also replied, unwilling to be outdone, "General LV is my lord. Dong Gong took advantage of my lord's injury and bullied others. Don't you know that the art of archery is higher than the other mountains?" After speaking, the long arrow in Cao Xing's hand had already been shot off the string. Dong Zhuo on the opposite side also roared and shot an arrow at Lu Bu. Due to Cao Xing's early preparation, the arrows approached Dong Zhuo's arrows in mid-air at an oblique angle, colliding with each other and shooting flames in all directions. Dong Zhuo was shocked at this and wanted to shoot another arrow, but he had no strength left. Cao Xing took this opportunity and raised his bow again to shoot an arrow at Dong Zhuo. Suddenly caught off guard, this arrow hit Dong Zhuo's front teeth, causing blood to flow and wailing uncontrollably. The morale of the Bingzhou army was greatly shaken by this, and LV Bu also showed a pleased smile. Fang Tianhua waved his halberd in mid-air and shouted loudly, "All soldiers, come with me to Luoyang to avenge Governor Ding. Kill me! Kill!" The 50,000 Bingzhou army quickly responded and rushed towards Luoyang like a tide. Unfortunately, although Dong Zhuo was hit by an arrow, the generals of the Western Liang dynasty still performed their respective duties. Seeing that LV Bu wanted to seize the city, Li Zhuo and Guosi led 100,000-strong army to quickly fight against the Bingzhou army. Although the morale of the Bingzhou army was high, the difference in numbers between the two armies was too great, and the war was intense. Faced with the elite of the Western Liang, they still fell behind. In addition, LV Bu charged into battle and even fell from his horse due to excessive bleeding after killing several people. Zhang Liao and others saw this situation and had no choice but to carry LV Bu back to the camp. Chapter 4. Unmatched Loyalty and Righteousness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The war was unfavorable, and the return journey was also cut off. A sense of sadness permeated the Bingzhou army, coupled with the injury of Commander LV Bu, casting a shadow over the hearts of all the soldiers. How is the situation? Lu Bu just woke up and quickly asked when he saw Zhang Liao and others guarding nearby. Under the treatment of accompanying military doctors, although Lu Bu's injuries were not serious, he is afraid that he will not be able to continue fighting in the short term. Zhang Liao briefly described the current situation of the war, and it was evident that his confidence was also declining at this moment. Starting from today, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Chao Xing, Wei Su, and others will defend their troops and horses at various locations to prevent Dongzhuo from attacking the camp. No. At this moment, a small school quickly walked in and bowed, saying, "Report to the Lord, Dong Ying has sent someone again." LV Bu covered his wound and glanced left and right. Zhang Liao on the right clenched his fists and said, "Dongzhuo is sending envoys at this time, so he must be planning to persuade us to surrender. The Lord must make early plans." Although Lu Bu had already made up his mind, he didn't know if the 4 people present would agree with his choice. How do some brothers feel about it? The few of them seemed to have a deep understanding and responded in unison, "We all follow the Lord's will, even if we die, we will not betray each other." Upon hearing this, LV Bu smiled and instructed the soldiers to invite the envoy of Dong Jun to enter. With the orders from the soldiers, Li Ru, who had been waiting outside the gate for a long time, calmly walked into the military camp. At this moment, the lights inside the tent were brightly lit, and more generals were already standing on both sides. LV Bu sat high above, although he had lost too much blood and his face was a bit pale, a calm and self-imposing aura emerged. Fengxian, Ruxian congratulates Fengxian on taking control of the 50,000 tiger and wolf warriors. Li Ru, with a confident expression on his face, ignited the anger of the generals with his first sentence after entering the camp, and for a moment, countless anger stared at him. Even at this moment, Lu Bu still held his breath in his heart. But he also knows that the current situation is critical, and he must not act impulsively. Although he fell behind, Lu Bu was not clumsy either. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth and he said in a deep voice, "Sir, do you know that Li Su died in this big tent?" "I know." Li Ru casually wrote, not moved at all. "Since that's the case, sir, are you planning to be Li Su's second?" Li Ru sneered, "The general won't kill me. You are Dongzhuo's right arm. If I kill you, I can cut off one of his arms. Do you think I will let such a good opportunity go for nothing?" Li Ru smiled faintly and said, "Because a general is a wise person. A wise person will not dig their own grave." Lu Bu is dull and silent. Looking at LV Bu, who had already stepped into a dead end but was still full of confidence, Li Ru took a step forward and said, "My lord, Mr. Dong, cherishes general's bravery and has specially ordered me to come." Li Ru paused for a moment and saw that LV Bu had no reaction in secret before sighing and saying, "Ding Gong died at the hands of a villain. This matter has nothing to do with Dong Gong. Unfortunately, Ding Gong is concerned about the Han dynasty, but he runs against the middle path. This is fate and cannot be violated." Although there was a conflict between the two families before, Dong Gong, disregarding past grievances, took the initiative to petition His Majesty for forgiveness for Ding Gong's unauthorized self-attack and attack of Luoyang. Moreover, our Lord cherishes the general's divine bravery and cannot bear to hide Bingzhou. Therefore, we have specially ordered Ru to come and hope that the general will abandon the darkness and join the Han dynasty. After Li Ru's words, the breathing of everyone in the tent was filled with confusion. The generals who came here on an expedition were already full of anxiety. Now that Ding Yuan has died, they are trapped here again. Upon hearing what Li Ru said, many people in the tent suddenly withdrew and looked at Lu Bu with hopeful faces. After all, no matter what means Dongzhuo uses to control the court, he currently represents the Han court. Once investigated, these people will be labeled as rebels at any time. Looking at everyone's eyes, Lu Bu could only sigh in his heart. If all the generals were united, he could have fought with all his might to capture Mengjin and directly cross the Yellow River back to Bingzhou. At that time, the emperor would be far away, and even if Dongzhuo's strength was strong, he would have no choice. Unfortunately, Dongzhuo, who holds the emperor in his hand, occupies the orthodoxy and represents justice. In the eyes of outsiders, if it weren't for Dong Zhuqing's side, the removal of eunuchs, and the act of salvation, the current emperor still doesn't know what his situation would be. Even if Lvbu wanted to resist, Dong Zhuo only needed a decree, and he would become a bandit that everyone in the world would shout to fight against. Dong Zhuo is not the rebellious traitor who killed the young emperor, dominated the capital, and harmed loyalty and righteousness. In terms of strength alone, Lvbu and he are completely not on the same level. After reflecting for a moment, Lvbu let out a long sigh in front of the generals in the tent, and said helplessly, "It's easy for me to surrender, but there are 3 conditions that Dong Gong must agree to. If not, even if I were to break my bones, I, Lvbu, would lead the army to risk everything and fight to the death." Faced with Lu Bu's fierce tiger-like devouring aura at this moment, Li Ru's throat surged with fear, and a forced smile appeared on his face. He even lifted his collar and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, thinking to himself that the tiger was still fierce. But according to the general's orders. Although Li Ru is Dong Zhuo's top strategist, he doesn't have the courage to make decisions. Simply put, he is just a transmitter, and the final decision is in the hands of Dong Zhuo. Firstly, although Duke Ding did not give birth to me, he was Bu's adoptive father, who taught me and promoted me. Now that he has died for his country, Bu's heart is filled with sorrow and indignation. However, national affairs are important, and I hope Duke Dong can give my adoptive father a grand funeral. Secondly, although Bu led his army to surrender, the surrendered one was the emperor, not Duke Dong. We hope that Duke Dong will abide by the etiquette and follow the military system of the Great Han Dynasty. Thirdly, after Bu leads his army to surrender, he must not mistreat us in terms of food, grass, and military equipment. It doesn't matter whether Lvbu himself is rewarded or not, but I, as brothers, are far away from our hometown. We hope that Dong Gong will treat us kindly. If one of the 3 is not allowed, Lvbu will definitely not surrender. After Lvbu finished his 3 requests, the generals in the tent also looked excited and grateful. The short 3 conditions directly elevated Lu Bu to the moral high ground. As an adopted son, he was filial to his adoptive father; as a vassal, he is only loyal to his majesty; as the commander-in-chief, he treated all his brothers with courage and shared weal and woe. This move, although people's hearts are different, everyone will admire Lu Bu. For a moment, the originally restless crowd knelt down on one knee in excitement and shouted in unison, "We are willing to follow the Lord and go through fire and water without hesitation." Li Ru looked at the excited generals of Bingzhou in front of him, with a hint of fear in his eyes. Before this, he had always thought that Lvbu was just a reckless man, with no military force, he could not achieve success. Now, upon seeing it, I realize that this person indeed has great ambitions and a meticulous mind. This kind of person, when used well, will become an arm; if not used properly, one may become a lifelong enemy. Confucianism must report to Duke Dong word for word. With the departure of Li Ru, the generals in the Bingzhou tent looked excitedly at Lu Bu, their eyes filled with endless admiration. To be fair, although Ding Yuan is their old boss, he has always been extremely harsh towards his subordinates. Nowadays, Lu Bu did not rely on military power to exchange for high officials and high salaries. Instead, he was thinking for their sake, and for a while, everyone was convinced. Looking at the excited soldiers in the camp, Lu Bu finally let go of the stone that had been hanging in his heart. Whether it's the proper handling of the previous killing of Ding Yuan or the current 3-chapter agreement with Dong Zhuo, what is being asked for is just 2 words. Loyalty and righteousness. The word loyalty and righteousness may seem easy, but there are actually a few people who can do it. Even though my demands are somewhat excessive. But he believed that Dong Zhuo would not refuse. After all, when asked the world, who wouldn't want a subordinate with excellent martial arts skills and unparalleled loyalty? Even though Lvbu doesn't need to be as famous as Guan Yu for eternity. But I also hope that through this incident, his name can be spread throughout the world, so that he will never end up as miserable as in history. As Lu Bu guessed, when Li Ru recounted everything, Dongzhuo not only remained calm, but also danced excitedly, clapping Chen Qing's hands. Although Li Ru had some concerns in his heart, seeing Dongzhuo so happy did not dampen his father-in-law's interest. After discussion, not only did Lu Bu agree to all 3 of his demands, but he also gave an additional 10 boxes of jewelry as a sign of sincerity. Lu Bu thanked him repeatedly and then distributed all the obtained jewelry to the soldiers, without taking any of it himself. The soldiers are grateful and even more supportive. Chapter 5. Demolition of Directors. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Luoyang, the eastern capital, has been particularly bustling lately. Firstly, there was the rebellion of He Jin and the 10 constant attendants, and then Dongzhuo led his army to investigate the situation. It hasn't been stable for a few days now, but Ding Yuan and Dongzhuo have started fighting again. Now there are rumors that Ding Yuan, the adopted son of the governor of Bingzhou, was subdued by Duke Dong. The early morning sunshine was still a bit gloomy, but the outside of Luoyang city was already filled with figures. Dongzhuo, dressed in armor and riding a sweaty BMW, patrolled along Zhuke Street under the protection of thousands of elite armored riders. Behind him were the civil and military officials of the Han dynasty. Dongzhuo had already mastered 100,000 iron cavalry in Shiliang. After entering Luoyang, he also controlled the troops of the 8th Battalion in Shiyuan and the northern and southern camps. Now, he has obtained 50,000 strong soldiers from Bingzhou. The civil and military officials, who always claimed to be loyal ministers of the Han dynasty, couldn't help but feel a hint of national sorrow on their faces when they saw Dongzhuo, who was full of energy. Many people even feel a bit dazed, not knowing what they are thinking inside. Woo! The long sound of horns echoed through the sky, and heavy and dense footsteps came from outside Luoyang city. Everyone looked forward, hoping to see the style of this strong army standing side by side with the Western Liang army. Outside the city of Luoyang, a well-organized and elite army slowly appeared in people's sight. Surprisingly, these elite soldiers all wore white scarves and flags, exuding a mournful aura. Led by Lu Bu, he was also dressed in a white robe, wearing a white scarf on his head, and his face was full of sadness. When the whole team entered the edge of Luoyang city, Lu Bu suddenly swung his halberd to the sky. Roar! The Bingzhou army, which was originally emitting a mournful expression, stopped in an instant. Such a prohibited action made the Han civil and military officials who were watching from afar take a breath of cold air and look at this mighty soldier in shock. Even Dongzhuo was excitedly gripping the sword in his hand, with a hint of worry on his face. Are you really impressed by yourself for being so strong in the army? Do you think LV Bu won't cheat? At this moment, Li Ru also felt a little uneasy. When Dongzhuo asked, he reluctantly put on a smile and replied, "Father-in-law, rest assured. Even if LV Bu has ulterior motives, there are 5,000 elite cavalry behind you to protect you. Once there is a change, we can cut you off at any time." After listening to Li Ru's words, Dongzhuo had a little confidence. Li Ru said again, "Lu Bu's return journey has been cut off. Even if he has the strength, he cannot withstand your father-in-law's tiger power and turn over any waves." Dongzhuo finally had a slight smile on his face, and his guarded heart also relaxed. After the army of Bingzhou stopped their pace, LV Bu howled and said, "All the troops are waiting here. Gao Shun and Zhang Liao will follow me forward." No. With Lu Bu's command, Gao Shun and Zhang Liao clasped their fists and respectfully responded. Under the sunshine, 3 war horses quickly emerged from the Bingzhou army, led by Lu Bu riding the red rabbit horse gifted by Dongzhuo. The fiery red hair fluttered in the wind like flames, and the red rabbit, which was 1 head higher than a typical warhorse, proudly snorted. BMW paired with heroes, as I saw today, it was indeed the case. Lu Bu's expression received praise from many people present. When there were still 300 steps away from Luoyang city, Lu Bu's pupils flickered with light, and he then restrained his warhorse and said in a deep voice, "Get off your horse and walk." With a command, Zhang Liao and Gao Shun also dismounted. In order to show sincerity, Lv Bu directly handed over Fang Tianhua's halberd to Gao Shun beside him, in order to dispel Dongzhua's guard. At this moment, Dongzhua also saw it vividly. Seeing Lu Bu hand over the weapon to the side, an unprecedented sense of pride finally rose in his eyes. BMW, we have it at home, mighty generals, our family also has them, Jiangshan, our family will also have it sooner or later. Excited, Dongzhua also dismounted and walked forward excitedly. As soon as he left, he suddenly broke away from the previously designed script. Unfortunately, he completely drifted away, and no matter how the soldiers behind him shouted, it was useless. Helpless, everyone could only dismount one after another and follow closely behind. In a moment, Lv Bu had already arrived in front of Dongzhua, and at the same time, his gaze also swept over the cavalry behind Dongzhua. He remained silent and guarded, holding a long spear as if ready to launch an attack at any moment. The closer you get, the more you feel the terrifying and murderous aura emanating from this cavalry. Before carefully observing, Dongzhua had already taken a long, dusty stride in the queue. Our family is finally looking forward to coming first. It has to be said that Dongzhua still has a clear and dominant appearance at this moment. Faced with himself, a surrendering general unexpectedly took a small step and appeared eager for talent. Such a posture also made Lu Bu's heart tremble. At the end of the Han dynasty, none of the heroes were truly ordinary people. Although Dongzhua opened his arms, his eyes were still wandering around Lu Bu's body. When it was confirmed that Lv Bu had no weapons and nothing on his body, it was only then that it was truly certain that the peerless general in front of him had truly arrived with sincerity, and for a moment, an excited expression couldn't help but rise in his heart. Lu Bu let out a deep sigh in his heart and immediately shook off his battle robe. He knelt down on one knee and said, "Mr. Dong values it." Dongzhua helped Lu Bu up and the two of them looked at each other. Seeing Lu Bu dressed in mourning, his face was filled with sadness and sorrow, and his heart couldn't conceal that joyful expression. Ding Yuan is truly fortunate to have such a loyal general. Unfortunately, he is still narrow-minded and cannot be lenient towards his subordinates. He also suppresses his adopted son. Such a person is destined to have difficulty achieving great things. In the end, even if one person's dead light goes out, there is no one to blame. Thinking of this, the more Dongzhua appreciated Lu Bu, the more excited he became. In addition to excitement, Dongzhua burst out laughing and said, "Fengxian can come, and our family is overjoyed. I have Fengxian better than 1,000,000 strong teachers." With a beard like a steel needle, Dongzhua's face was rough, and he excitedly pulled Lv Bu's arms, constantly praising him. If it weren't for Lu Bu's deep understanding of Dongzhua's fate, he would probably have been impressed by him at this moment. Unlike Cao Cao and Liu Bei, Dongzhua exudes a sense of boldness from the northwest. The style of action is different from that of the Central Plains, and it is probably because of this personality that it has gained the admiration of the leaders of the Liangzhou and Chang ethnic groups. Lu Bu broke free from Dongzhua's arm and took a step back, saying sorrowfully, "Thank you very much, Duke Dong, for disregarding his previous wrongdoing. Bu only hopes that Duke Dong can transport his adoptive father's coffin back to Bingzhou for a grand burial soon. From then on, Bu Ding will serve the court and repay Duke Dong's great kindness." Looking at Lu Bu kneeling on one knee again, Dongzhua's eyes became more and more joyful, although he did not say he wanted to be loyal to himself. But a person with a force of 50,000 does not seek any fame or fortune, but only seeks to bury the old master. Such character can be regarded as a model for the world. I respectfully request your permission. Our family has requested your Majesty's decree to posthumously appoint Ding Yuan as the Marquis of Taiyuan, and to bury him with the courtesy of the feudal lords. Upon hearing this, Lu Bu respectfully clenched his fists and shouted, "Thank you very much for the kindness of Duke Dong. Buting is determined to defend the court to the death and Duke Dong to the death." The civil and military officials around them, upon hearing what Lu Bu had said, also had a sorrowful expression on their faces. How unfortunate and unfair it is that the loyal officials and generals of the great Han dynasty have fallen into the hands of Dongzhuo. Prior to this, the name of Lu Bu was unknown to everyone present. But with today's release, everyone will inevitably have a complex expression in their hearts, and even more so, they will secretly hate Ding Yuan for hiding the pearl, causing the great Han to miss out on talent. Immediately, Dongzhuo instructed Lu Bu to lead his army into the city and station at Nandiying. Lu Bu gladly took orders and led his team to lead the way. A large army of 50,000 soldiers from Bingzhou walked with agile steps on Zhuke Street, holding their heads and chests high, attracting admiration from the people of Luoyang. Truly a great teacher. At the corner of the road, standing here, just enough to overlook a corner of the palace wall, Lu Bu suddenly made a stunning move. Holding the Fangtian painting halberd in his hand, with its head facing the sky, he shouted loudly, "Long live the great Han, long live your majesty." Under his guidance, 50,000 soldiers shouted in unison, the sound like thunder, echoing through the sky. Ding! The host gains a slightly underwhelming title and rewards 1 point of omnipotent attribute. Through this incident, the name of Lu Bu's loyalty and righteousness quickly spread throughout Luoyang. Chapter 6. New Plans. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the study, Lu Bu sat in the main seat, while Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, Chao Xing, and Wei Su were separated on both sides. Dongzhuo gave the former mansion of General He Miao, a cavalry general, to Lu Bu. Lu Bu was grateful and did not refuse. After placing the Bingzhou army in the south camp, I brought over 100 personal soldiers and 4 trusted generals to live here. My lord, the crisis has been resolved now, but why do I see you still feeling unhappy? Asked Gao Xuanfa, who had a straightforward personality. Yeah. Dongzhuo is also quite polite. Today, he even gave away 20 beautiful women and more than 10 boxes of gold and silver. Such a generous reward, it was something I couldn't even think of at Ding Yuan's place in the past. Brother, I think there are a few pretty women who are pretty good, why not tonight? That's enough for Ziji. Now it's a matter of discussion, what's the proper way to talk about these things? Zhang Liao scolded in dissatisfaction. This time, Lu Bu was able to get out of the predicament, and Zhang Liao helped a lot later. That's why Lu Bu entrusted him with a heavy responsibility. Nowadays, Zhang Liao seems to have a posture of surpassing Gao Shun and becoming the second most important figure in the Bingzhou army. Gao Shun is a good old man, so naturally he won't care about these things. But Wei Su is not. He is the eldest uncle of Lu Bu. In the past, he could ignore it, but Lu Bu is no longer a small clerk under Ding Yuan's command. He has become a powerful figure in charge of 50,000 wolf cavalry in Bingzhou. Now, he has gained the appreciation of Dongzhuo, and his future is naturally limitless. With the intention of not letting the fat and water flow into the fields of outsiders, the position of this second in command should never be more suitable for oneself than that of an outsider like Zhang Liao. Due to personal desires, Wei Su became increasingly dissatisfied with Zhang Liao. This is also good for the Lord. Alright, Lu Bu interrupted them and took a light sip of the wine from the table, frowning slightly. This Han Dynasty wine is really not satisfying to drink. I wanted to borrow wine to relieve my worries, but after drinking a jar, I didn't even feel a trace of drunkenness except for bloating. At this moment, the hurried footsteps of the guards came from outside the door. I hereby inform you, Lord. The Dong mansion has just sent someone to deliver a message. Lord Dong will hold a banquet in the mansion tonight to welcome you and clean up the dust. As the guards stepped down, Lu Bu put down his wine bowl and looked at the people in front of him. Just as he was about to speak, another guard quickly came over. "Lord, the Grand Tutor Yuan's mansion has sent someone to deliver a message that the Grand Tutor wants to entertain you at the mansion tonight. Please be sure to show your respect." Now, not only Lu Bu, but also Zhang Liao, Gao Shun and others beside him were shocked. Yuan Wei and Dong Zhuo are the leaders of the two factions of power in this court, which are equally powerful. The Yuan family has 4 generations and 3 nobles throughout the world, and the contemporary head of the family, Yuan Wei, holds the position of Grand Tutor. It is unknown how many prefectural governors in the world are all under his command. Although Dong Zhuo is currently in the prime of his life, he still feels a bit hesitant when facing Yuan Wei, giving him a fair share. Such a leading figure, surprisingly, put down his figure and actively invited Lv Bu to a banquet. It can be seen that the appearance of Lu Bu has already caused a change in the balance of the court. Even Yuan Wei, who had always relied on his own dignity, had to actively win over Lu Bu to prevent Dong Zhuo from continuing to grow and harm his own interests. "Master, we can't afford to provoke either of these two families. If we attend a banquet at the same time, going to either family may offend the other. Otherwise, let's call ourselves sick and not go to either side." Gao Shun pondered and asked. "No way." Zhang Liao said firmly. Turning his gaze, he fell on Lu Bu and respectfully bowed to him, saying, "Today outside the city, both Yuan Wei and Dong Zhuo were present, and I believe they all saw the scene at that time. If the Lord were to complain of illness at this time, it might not only be an excuse, but also a possibility of offending both families. Therefore, I believe that it would be better to go to Dong Zhuo's mansion to take the lighter of the two harms. As for Yuan Wei, it is not too late to first write a letter and then slowly make up for it." Lv Bu glanced at Zhang Liao and agreed with his statement in his heart. Dong Zhuo has just bestowed so many blessings on himself. If he does not comply with all his wishes at this time, it is inevitable that others will consider him arrogant, thus losing his courtesy. Just as he was planning to arrange tonight's affairs, another personal guard came to the door. "I hereby inform you that a small yellow gate has just been dispatched to the palace. Your Majesty is hosting a banquet in Changle Palace to entertain you." "Your Majesty!" everyone exclaimed in surprise. In an instant, a smile reappeared on Lu Bu's face and he breathed a sigh. "It's better to come early than to come coincidentally. While I was worrying here, everything came naturally. Alright, tonight Bopping will come with me into the palace. I will personally write a letter later. Could you please send someone from Wenyuan to deliver it to Yuan Wei and Dong Zhuo's mansion?" Zhang Liao and Gao Shun were ordered to leave. At this moment, the Grand General's mansion was filled with singing and dancing, and Dong Zhuo's trusted generals were sitting on both sides. A graceful maid kept serving delicious wine and food, and Dong Zhuo, who was on his head, laughed heartily, holding wine bottles and exchanging them with everyone. At this moment, the servants of the mansion slowly arrived at the main hall. "But Feng Xian has arrived?" Dong Zhuo asked urgently. The servant hesitated for a moment and replied, "Just now, General Lv's mansion sent someone to deliver a letter saying that His Majesty will summon him, and he has to go. He can only come to the Lord's mansion another day to apologize." Dong Zhuo frowned deeply upon hearing this, and a wave of anger surged in his heart. The generals next to them were also whispering, each unable to conceal their resentment. As both generals, the radiance on Lv Bu's body was really too strong. Compared to him, the generals of the Western Liang dynasty seemed to be nothing but wine bags and rice bags. In addition, Dong Zhuo's unequal rewards made them secretly dissatisfied with Lv Bu. Now, Lu Bu was unable to come to the banquet, which happened to give everyone a reason to attack him. The first seat on the right side, Li Xian, took the opportunity to ridicule and said, "I just joined the Lord's command in Luoyang and was so arrogant. Your Majesty, those are all things in the Lord's hands. If I don't come to visit you at this moment, I will go to visit a yellow-mouthed child. It's really ridiculous, ridiculous." Upon hearing these words, Dongzhuo's anger grew stronger and stronger. On the other side, Li Ru smiled and said, "My son.in.law, congratulations to my father.in.law. Congratulations to my father.in.law." Upon hearing this, Dongzhuo felt a bit confused and angrily said, "Wenyo's move is not to mock our family. Where did this joy come from?" Liu Bu's actions show that this person is indeed a loyal and brave general who speaks with sincerity. I wonder if his father.in.law still remembers that in the 3 events of the surrender of the Bingzhou army, Liu Bu clearly stated that the surrender was to the emperor, not his father.in.law. Now going to pay homage to the emperor is the way to be a minister. Writing to his father.in.law with sincere words and thanking for promotion shows this person's loyalty. My father.in.law, who has obtained this loyal minister, has no worries about not achieving great success. Dongzhuo was originally furious, but upon hearing Li Ru's words, he burst into laughter. In an instant, he felt very uncomfortable again. Although Lu Bu was truly loyal, it was not himself who paid his respects, but the yellow-mouthed child. This knot was hidden in his heart, how could he feel comfortable? As a strategist of Dongzhuo, Li Ru couldn't help but see his father.in.law's thoughts and continued, "The Bingzhou army has surrendered, and the stumbling block has been removed. My father.in.law can take the action of abolishing the throne. After the emperor's sole power is abolished, Liu Bu will naturally understand and return to his heart." The present generals also hope that Dongzhuo will act early, so that they can also rise in the tide and be granted high-ranking officials. Unlike the bustling Dong mansion, the Yuan mansion appears much quieter. After reading Liu Bu's letter, Yuan Wei remained calm and handed the letter to several colleagues nearby. After reading it, Lu Ji, Chen Lin, and others present also remained silent. After a while, Yuan Wei said, "The situation in Luoyang is turbulent. Now that Dongzhuo's family is dominant, sooner or later they will take action to abolish them. Previously, Ding Jianyang was mediating outside to try to contain them. Now that Jianyang has died, the armies of Bingzhou have surrendered Dongzhuo again. If we continue to sit idly by, we are afraid that Dongzhuo will eventually develop a sense of rebellion. By then, we will really have no place to bury ourselves." "What does Yuan Gong mean?" Chen Lin asked softly. Yuan Wei pointed to the bamboo slips on the table and said, "Lu Bu is indeed loyal to His Majesty, and he holds a heavy army, so he can be our help. Dongzhuo was powerful, and Liu Bu was trapped in Luoyang. Although he held a large army, it was difficult to find a place to use it." Yuan Wei smiled faintly with a wisp of his beard and said, "Man plans, but God does. If Liu Bu is truly loyal to the Han dynasty, I can also lend him a helping hand. If you're afraid, then you're afraid. He's also a wolf in sheep's clothing." Chapter 7. Empress Dowager He. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the Changle Palace, cigarettes are everywhere. The table was filled with delicious food, emitting a tempting aroma. Shouty Lu Bian sat on the dragon chair, his stomach constantly making moans. Sitting next to him was a young woman in her 30s and a woman in white clothes in her teens. "Mother, it's getting late, and my son is really hungry. Why don't we wait while we eat? At least you are also an emperor. Don't you even understand the principle of respecting the wise and virtuous? If you want to die, you can rest assured, Empress Dowager," he scolded upon hearing this. This pampered and beautiful young woman used to have skin as smooth as ice and snow, graceful, with a beautiful appearance of 2 or 8, and green hair as ink. In just half a month's work, she appears old and pale, with a haggard appearance and slightly visible wrinkles. Emperor Lu Bian's face turned pale and he was at a loss, unable to speak for a long time. Looking at her son's pitiful appearance, Empress Dowager, he was so angry that she cursed, "I have been wise all my life, how could I have given birth to a pitiful loser like you?" Lu Bian didn't know how to defend himself, so he could only silently wipe away his tears. The weakness of a generation of emperors is truly a tragedy for the common people. Your Majesty, Captain Cavalry Lu Bu requests to see you. Upon hearing the palace maid's report, Empress Dowager he breathed a sigh and lowered the stone hanging in her heart. Lu Buchan came at this moment, and it seems that the rumors outside are true. He is indeed a loyal vassal of the great Han. Lu Bian was also delighted to hear that LV Bu had come in response to the edict. The main leader is in place, and there is no need to continue to wait empty for hunger. Great. Xuan Lu Bu pays his respects. In a moment, LV Bu had already walked in. The inner courtyard of the palace is full of Dongzhuo's eyeliner and subordinates. As the most popular person around Dongzhuo, no one dares to stop him. I, Cavalry Captain Lu Bu, see your Majesty, Empress Dowager. Seeing Lu Bu dressed in military uniform, Lu Bian's heart was filled with inexplicable fear, which not only did not diminish but also intensified. Trembling, he said, "Get up, get up." Lu Bu stood up with a pair of bright and spirited British eyes, unmoved by the gaze of Lu Bian and Empress Dowager he. Inside the main hall, it was surprisingly quiet and the atmosphere was somewhat dull. Empress Dowager he could only smile awkwardly and say, "Captain LV has made contributions to the country, and your Majesty deeply understands it. That's why a banquet was held in the palace to entertain him." Lu Bai replied with a righteous tone, "The Empress Dowager has praised me too much. I am a minister of the great Han dynasty, and I should receive the favor of the country for my food and wealth. What I do is just my duty." Empress Dowager he saw that Lu Bian was expressionless and quickly gave her son a glance. Lu Bian awkwardly nodded and said, very good. Empress Dowager he complained in her heart that she no longer expected her son to protect her life. "Captain LV, please take your seat." Lu Bu bowed in return and sat in the position where Empress Dowager he had her head down. Empress Dowager he nodded at the woman across from her, who trembled and stood up trembling. She walked to Lu Bu's side and sat there straight. Colonel Lu, I'll pour you some wine." Lu Bu pretended to be flattered and quickly stood up and stepped back, saying, "I dare not trouble madam to pour wine herself." Empress Dowager his eyes were filled with desolation, and she self-deprecatingly said, "Nowadays, she's not as old as before. Now, she's the Empress Dowager, and maybe the next moment she'll be a prisoner. It's her honor to pour wine for a great hero like Captain LV." Upon seeing this, LV Bu quickly put on a look of fear and bent down, saying, "The Empress Dowager's words have made me anxious." Empress Dowager he, who had just been domineering and leaking on her side, now feels like someone has pulled a plug and suddenly vented her anger. In a low voice, he sobbed and said, "Dong thief forced our mother and son, but the emperor did not bless us." Although the officials of the Manchu dynasty were officials of the Han dynasty, none of them were willing to eradicate traitors and suppress the thieves. If this continues, the foundation of the Han dynasty will surely fall into the hands of Dong thief. Unfortunately, our women's family has no strength to bind chickens, so we can only compromise and seek the protection of Captain LV. Lu Bian, who was originally enjoying his meal next to him, was also crying loudly in unison. Looking at the scene in front of him, Lu Bu couldn't help but want to laugh. Although they know that this is acting, they probably have some genuine feelings. As the Empress Dowager and Emperor, being bullied by foreign ministers in her own home is so painful. If Emperor Lu Bang knew about it, he would probably be so angry that the coffin could not be covered. The Empress Dowager has a high regard for me. I am just a lieutenant. Now, thanks to Duke Dong's unwavering commitment, I have a place to live. Even if I take orders like this, I may not be able to do anything. Instead of doing so, the Empress Dowager would rather save herself. Self-rescue. Empress Dowager he looked quietly at Lu Bu in front of her, lost in thought. Lu Bu also carefully examined the elegant and luxurious woman in front of him. Empress Dowager he was only 30 years old, and with her luxurious clothing and food, she looked very young, no different from ordinary girls. In addition, her unattainable goddess temperament gives people a strong desire to conquer. Looking at him, Lvbu suddenly had a wicked idea in his heart. If we push down Empress Dowager, May I ask Captain LV, how can our palace and His Majesty save themselves? Empress Dowager regained her senses and met Lu Bu's gaze. Lu Bu's aggressive gaze immediately stirred Empress Dowager's mind, as if she had a vague and shy feeling of returning to her childhood as a little girl. Since marrying Emperor Ling in the palace, she has gradually ascended to the position of Empress. After giving birth to a prince, she constantly competed with the concubines in the harem. Rather than saying she likes the spirit emperor, it's more accurate to say she likes the feeling of everyone surrendering under her feet. Unfortunately, the sickly body of Emperor Ling made her feel dissatisfied with her desires all year round, and there was no healthy man in the palace. The year-round neglect made her like a dusty volcano, waiting only for a moment of eruption. And Lu Bu's appearance just confirmed that statement. It's not impossible, the time hasn't arrived yet. Lvbu is not as rough and rude as other generals. On the contrary, he hugged his shoulders together, his face like powder, his sword eyebrows, his handsome eyes clearly white, his nose like a jade pillar, and his mouth like vermilion, exuding an unparalleled martial prowess. Such a character naturally captivated Empress Dowager who had been living deeply in the harem for years, at first sight. The two of them looked at each other without making a sound for a long time. Such impoliteness caused the Tang concubine next to them to be shocked and pale. With a light cough, as a reminder, the two finally regained their senses. Since it's impossible to go against the sky, why not just push the boat with the current? When it comes to power, Empress Dowager's strong female demeanor erupted once again. Looking at Lu Buxiu in front of her, she frowned slightly and said, "Are you saying, let your majesty abdicate voluntarily?" "No. It's giving way." "Impossible, absolutely impossible. His Highness is the eldest son of the late emperor and the legitimate heir to the throne. How could he give it to that petty thief Lu Xie?" Lu Bu sighed inwardly and said, "I dare ask Empress Dowager, even if you don't want to, is there still room for maneuver in this matter? Just now when I entered the palace, I could see clearly that all the places in the palace were the soldiers and horses of Duke Dong. Even if the Empress Dowager is stubborn, could she still twist her thigh?" Empress Dowager felt as if she had been struck by a heavy hammer, and with a chill in her heart, she took a few steps back. "The Empress Dowager asked me for advice before, and in my opinion, it is powerless to maintain power. But if I want to save my life, that's all I need to do. When the time comes, I will speak eloquently in front of Duke Dong. The Empress Dowager is still the Empress Dowager, but she is not in Luoyang, but going to enfeoff the country." Empress Dowager gritted her teeth and listened to Lvbu's words. He seemed to have no choice but to follow Lvbu's plan in order to keep Lu Bian and Tang Fei alive. But Empress Dowager was unwilling. She didn't want to give up just like this. Her only bargaining chip at the moment was Lu Bu. She has no intention of completely giving up her pursuit of power until the last moment. With this in mind, he let out a deep sigh and bowed slightly to Lu Bu, saying, "I hope Colonel LV shows mercy. The lives of our palace and your majesty are all counting on you." Looking at Empress Dowager's plump figure, Lu Bu forcefully suppressed the desire in his heart. Lying on the knee of a beautiful woman drunk, waking up and wielding the power of the world, the ancients were truly sincere and did not deceive me. In this world, I, Lu Bu, have taken it, I also want this beauty. Chapter 8. Luoyang Order. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After Lvbu returned home from the banquet, Dongzhuo's eyeliner reported the news. Unfortunately, the most crucial details were unknown because there were no outsiders inside the main hall at that time. Although Dongzhuo had doubts in his heart, he suspected that there was something sinister in it. But thinking of Li Ru's words, I still believe Lu Bu for the time being. 2 days later, Dong Zhuo had a sudden idea and sent someone to Lv Bu's mansion, inviting him to go to Beidang to observe the soldiers practicing. The two major camps in Luoyang, north and south, were handed over to the Bingzhou army for garrison in the south, while the north camp was all under Dong Zhuo's leadership in Xianyang. The main forces of Xianyang Iron Cavalry, Flying Bear Army, etc. are all here. Dong Zhuo invited him, and Lu Bu naturally dared not disobey, leading his two attendants to gallop forward. Within the Beida camp, flags take shelter from the sky. The generals were dressed in armor and shouted to kill Jintian. Only Lv Bu, dressed in white clothes and wearing a white scarf on his head, stood among tens of thousands of soldiers, extremely eye-catching. But Dong Zhuo didn't take it seriously. In his eyes, he loved and hated Lu Bu at the moment. I love Lu Bu so much for his loyalty and bravery, but I hate Ding Yuan Pifu for being so lucky to have such a great general like Lu Bu. I love his loyalty and righteousness, but unfortunately, the object of his loyalty and righteousness is not myself. People are like this, the less they can get, the more they want to get it. Feng Xian, did our Xianyang Erlang under our command ever catch your eye? Lu Bu looked at the soldiers present in Xianyang with an indifferent expression and said, does Dong Gong want to listen to the truth or lie? Upon hearing Lu Bu's words, Dong Zhuo's face suddenly changed and he looked at Lu Bu with a puzzled expression, asking, how is the truth? Dong Gong's Xianyang soldiers were indeed considered elite, but Bu heard that after the army entered Luoyang, many soldiers would cause trouble in Luoyang, with disturbance and chaos as the norm. Bu believed that although such an army may be strong for a while, it may not be strong for a lifetime. The generals of the Western Liang army who were practicing around were all glaring angrily upon hearing this statement. How can one tolerate being in a military camp and belittling them so much, with a straightforward personality? Dong Zhuo's face gradually darkened with joy, and Li Ru, who was nearby, looked at him with a shocked and puzzled expression. Although being frank and outspoken is a good thing, it is also important to balance situations and people. What is Xianyang army? It's Dong Zhuo's flesh and soul. Being so outspoken and undisguised is not embarrassing Dong Zhuo by publicly slapping him in the face. At the same time, he also felt a little happy in his heart. Previously, Lu Bu's image of loyalty and righteousness had already made him aware of the threat. Even if some members of the Western Liang army were dissatisfied, they probably secretly admired him. But now, Lu Bu's words are equivalent to provoking all the generals of the Western Liang army. The Western Liang army and the Bingzhou army were on par, so Dong Zhuo was able to better control the two armies and maintain balance. Lu Bu looked at the expressions of everyone, especially Dong Zhuo and Li Ru, and suddenly froze, pretending to be confused. At this moment, he actually had a plan deep in his heart. He understood the principle of shooting a bird with a gun. Since then, he has gathered the Bingzhou army and entered Luoyang with great fanfare. Although the name of loyalty and righteousness is widely spread, it also exposes himself to everyone. A perfect person often makes people feel unreal, so they will pay more attention. Especially with the side of a peerless hero like Dong Zhuo, over time it will surely become a thorn in his side. With the original intention of sleazy development, Lv Bu is now trying his best to play the role of a loyal minister and warrior. The impression he wants to leave in the minds of Dong Zhuo and Li Ru can only be that of a general rather than someone who is cunning in both civil and military affairs. Dong Zhuo's face was gloomy as he looked at Lu Bu with a calm expression on his face, unsure of what he was thinking. The soldiers of the Western Liang dynasty, don't allow you to underestimate me. As soon as the words fell, a tall and rugged general in the Western Liang army roared with displeasure. Faced with countless sharp gazes from the soldiers of the Western Liang around him, Lv Bu still maintained a disdainful attitude, with a disdainful expression. Feng Xian is a joking remark. Don't take it seriously, Huaxiong, why don't you step back quickly? Dong Zhuoqiang, who couldn't help but smile, chuckled a few times as he looked at the awkward scene in front of him. Although Lu Bu is telling the truth, his advice is really harsh. Wu Fu is Wu Fu, and he doesn't even know how to choose a suitable occasion. Dong Zhuo stood up as a mediator, and the generals of the Western Liang could only swallow their anger. But Hua Xiong, who was removed from the list, couldn't help but feel the anger in his heart. Before the future of Lu Bu, he was the first fierce general under Dong Zhuo's command and the most trusted minister. But the appearance of Lu Bu made his glory fade away. Now, Lu Bu's attitude of not paying any attention to them has made him even more annoyed. As the world knows, the male soldiers of the Western Liang dynasty, are all fierce warriors and unmatched. The generals in the tent are also famous all over the world and have bravely crowned the Third Army. However, it seems that Colonel LV does not think so. Regarding the intimidating Hua Xiong in front of him, Lu Bu smiled lightly and said, although not all the generals of the Western Liang dynasty have been seen, they have to avoid their sharpness to kill the Chang people, and can barely be considered good generals. But when it comes to fame, I think it's still a bit exaggerated. A sentence instantly reignited the anger of the generals of the Western Liang. Even Dong Zhuo stared at Lu Bu with some anger at the moment. Lu Bu's words are really disrespectful. Firstly, he said that the Western Liang army was lax in discipline and had a corrupt military discipline. Then praising and then belittling the generals seems to indicate one's attitude. Your army in Xiliang is competing with the Chang ethnic group in Xiliang. If we really consider their strength, in his eyes, they are a group of local chickens, tiles, and dogs. There were many brave soldiers in the Western Liang army, and Lu Bu's words caused many people to be furious and tense. Just wait for their lord's command and prepare to draw a knife to kill. At this moment, Dong Zhuo suddenly said in a deep voice, "What do you want to do?" When the generals saw Dong Zhuo angry, they immediately withdrew their flags and drums, afraid to speak. Don't be fooled by Dong Zhuo's old age, he is not as powerful as before. But in anger, their face was full of flesh, coupled with steel needle-like whiskers and copper bell-sized eyeballs, which were enough to intimidate them. If Dong Zhuo and LV Bu, after deposing the emperor, dared to speak such words in public, he would probably have dragged them out and cracked them off long ago. Nowadays, he is still a calm and rational person. Master, don't be angry. Under the anger of Dong Zhuo, only Li Ru dared to speak up and advise in the Western Liang army. Dong Zhuo turned his back and didn't want to take another look at Lu Bu. The Western Liang army was his proud capital, but now he is being underestimated by others, how can he not be angry? With Li Ru's advice, the angry expression on his face finally calmed down slowly. Compared to the angry gazes of the generals in the Western Liang, a hint of approval flashed deep in Li Ru's eyes at this moment. Loyalty goes against the ear, but if you pass the test, you will die young. Lu Bu was just a newcomer, so he spoke openly in front of everyone. No wonder he was so brave but was repeatedly ostracized and feared by Ding Yuan, ultimately leading to the fate of a chief clerk. Although there is strength and ambition, it is ultimately difficult to achieve great things without a city government and scheming. How could he not be unaware of the faults of the Western Liang army, and even insinuate many times? At the beginning of the establishment of the Xiliang army, they had always acted in this way, from commanding officers to every soldier, without any military discipline in their hearts. Li Ru also felt deeply worried, but as a civil servant, he was not good at interfering in military affairs. Even if he mentioned it repeatedly, it was of no use. Lu Bu's frank statement was indeed beyond his expectations. But it was precisely because of Lu Bu's stubbornness that he let go of his guard and was willing to exonerate him. After all, loyal officials are rare, and a loyal and outspoken general is even more rare. Lord, Captain LV has just arrived and I don't know the truth. Please forgive me. However, since General LV has mentioned that there are soldiers disturbing people's livelihoods in Luoyang, why not let General LV be responsible for the security of Luoyang to ensure the stability of the capital? Li Ru borrowed a donkey from the slope and planned to use the strong wind of LV Bu to rectify the atmosphere of the Western Liang army. His eyes kept winking at Dongzhuo. After seeing it, Dongzhuo, although angry in his heart, still said, "Since that's the case, I'll be a Luoyang magistrate first." "My lord, I will not be convinced." Chapter 9. The Overlord Lives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dongzhuo fixed his gaze and saw that it was Hua Xiong again. He, who was still feeling stuffy in his heart, suddenly flashed a hint of thought. For Hua Xiong, Dongzhuo was overjoyed. Not only was Hua Xiong the most powerful general in the Western Liang, but also his confidant had saved him from danger multiple times. Now that Lu Bu is so strong, Dongzhuo feels a bit dissatisfied. Seeing Hua Xiong appear, I happen to take this opportunity to kill Lu Bu's prestige. Military aircraft matters, how could you be reckless here? Why don't you quickly retreat? Hua Xiong stubbornly said, in the Western Liang army, martial arts are the top priority, and achievements are the key to success. Even though Lu Bu may have some fame, he wants to surpass us and supervise us, but Hua Xiong is not satisfied. As he spoke, Hua Xiong's face was fixed on Lu Bu with an angry gaze. Lu Bu sneered and said, "So what do you want?" A pair of tiger eyes from Hua Xiong were passing by everywhere, and finally settled on a large bronze cauldron commonly used for worshipping the heavens in the southeast corner. "We are all ministers in the same hall, and we are all under the Lord's command. If we compete and hurt anyone, it will inevitably hurt our harmony. Since that's the case, let's rely on this cauldron. If you can carry it like me, I Hua Xiong will obey you." After speaking, a bright light flashed through Hua Xiong's pupils, and he gave Lu Bu a sideways glance before taking a big step forward. Hua Xiong's tone and movements instantly attracted the surrounding soldiers to watch. When everyone saw Hua Xiong really walk up to this large bronze cauldron, they all took a cold breath in an instant and looked at him incredulously. Although Hua Xiong is 8 feet tall and sturdy like a bear, standing next to this 2-meter-high cauldron does not appear tall at all. Hua Xiong's waist sank, his two thick and long legs spread apart, and his face was filled with unprecedented solemnity. His palms were sweating profusely. The thick palms suddenly embraced the big cauldron in front of him, and in an instant, Hua Xiong's face turned red, and his eyes were bloodshot. With a shout of anger, there was a sound of inhaling from the onlookers around him. Dongzhuo was even more shocked as he looked at Hua Xiong. When he saw Hua Xiong really holding up this giant cauldron, his face became extremely ecstatic and he shouted, "I truly deserve to be the first fierce general of Xiliang, good." Hua Xiong's face turned red as he held it back, and his arms around the cauldron felt a tingling sensation. But when he heard Dongzhuo's admiration, a huge force suddenly surged out of him again, and he slowly moved his steps with a red face. As Hua Xiong slowly moved while holding the big cauldron, everyone's pupils also contracted with his movement in an instant. The stone slab that Hua Xiong walked under his feet made a crisp sound, covered in dents and cracked patterns. When Hua Xiong came to the parade platform carrying the large cauldron, the cauldron was lowered and directly smashed through the wooden boards on the ground, sinking deep into it. The generals of the Western Liang around saw this situation and all cheered for Hua Xiong. Breathing, wheezing. Hua Xiong was panting heavily, feeling a light and ethereal sensation on his body. The severe detachment made him feel like he was spinning around, but after watching his colleagues and subordinates cheering and shocked at him, a strong sense of pride still emerged in his heart. Taking a moment to rest, Hua Xiong proudly clasped his fists and roared at Dongzhuo, "Lord, I will be impolite." Okay. Dongzhuo said 3 good words, with an excited expression on his face. Everyone present could feel the majestic aura emanating from Hua Xiong at this moment. With full confidence, he didn't forget to look at Lu Bu as a provocation. The people around also looked at Lu Bu, wanting to see the charm of this flying general from Bingzhou. Even Dongzhuo didn't seem to notice Hua Xiong's blatant provocation, but instead kept praising his bravery. Captain LV, please. Without waiting for any instructions from Dongzhuo, Hua Xiong in the field proudly straightened his chest and waved his arms, seemingly showing a respectful gesture but now exuding a strong sense of provocation. After watching Hua Xiong's performance, LV Bu slowly walked forward, with a hint of approval flashing in his eyes. Under great fame, there is no illustrious person, and sincerity does not deceive me. With such strength, no wonder they can repeatedly slay Yu Shi and Pan Feng at the Tiger Prison Pass. Unfortunately, bravery is bravery. If one relies solely on strength, they will become stronger when encountering weakness and weaker when encountering strength, and it will eventually be difficult to enter the super first class realm. Faced with countless gazes around him, LV Bu slowly walked to the cauldron and looked at the huge cauldron in front of him, which was covered in strange and beautiful patterns, with a hint of desire flashing in his eyes. After the previous arrangements, his loyalty and righteousness have now been widely spread in Luoyang city, but these are not enough. The curtain of the chaotic world is about to open due to the overthrow of the young emperor. In order to gain greater reputation and achievements, everyone must know his strength. King Xiang is also not good at intelligence and strategy. With his courage alone, he was able to win the allegiance of countless famous officials and generals. Although he ultimately lost to Emperor Gaozu, it was also because he was stubborn and self-reliant, unable to make good use of others. As long as he tries his own ox knife and spreads his reputation all over the world, combined with his loyalty and righteousness towards the old master, he will have the capital to dominate the world. The cold metallic sensation spread from his skin to his heart. Lu Bu closed his eyes slightly and slowly felt the huge ancient cauldron. With a slight force from his palm, Lu Bu's pupils shrank in an instant. Observing his Huaxiong from the side, a hint of mockery flashed at the corner of his mouth. In front of everyone, Lu Bu didn't rush to take action, but instead circled around the cauldron and finally stood in the direction facing the crowd below. Lu Bu was in a hurry to take action quickly, but quickly opened the system interface and added the only special attribute point to the force, and suddenly a huge force burst out from his bones. The strong tingling sensation immediately shook LV Buhu's body. With a confident expression on his face, he slowly squatted down. Then, in the astonished eyes of everyone, he slowly extended a palm to touch one of the 3 gilded feet of the big tripod. At this moment, not to mention the soldiers around him, even Li Ru, who was not skilled in martial arts, would shrink his pupils fiercely and look extremely serious. Unlike Huaxiong holding a cauldron, this one-armed cauldron requires a completely different level of explosive power at the moment of lifting. Huaxiong, who had been fighting for years, understood the depth, and Dongzhuo also understood it. At this moment, he looked at Lu Bu with a shocked and solemn expression. Ha! A thunderous roar broke out, and under the shocked and stunned gaze of everyone, Lu Bu's arms suddenly exerted force, and his muscles began to tighten. Especially against the armor, it was clear that his right arm swelled in a circle at the moment of exerting force. Crunch, crunch. The ripe copper cauldron weighing thousands of pounds made a loud friction sound and was slowly lifted up in front of everyone's eyes. Hiss. Surrounded by the sound of inhaling backwards, Huaxiong's entire face turned into shock and shock. He was already very capable of lifting the tripod with one arm. Previously, Huaxiong intentionally increased the difficulty and stuck the tripod in the middle of a wooden block. Now, LV Bu slowly lifted it, not only bearing the force of the tripod, but also the friction of the wooden block. But Lu Bu was able to accurately apply his explosive power to various positions, making his body more stable. Perhaps only the legendary gods can achieve this. The veins on LV Bu's forehead erupted, and his thick palm tightly grasped the corner of the cauldron. Just as the cauldron was lifted to his chest, Lu Bu once again stopped drinking. Under the dull gaze of everyone, he forcefully lifted the cauldron, which was one head higher than himself, over his head. Ding! The host completes the Overlord lifting the cauldron task and rewards one ordinary attribute point. Chapter 10. Division of labor among generals, joint plan for major events. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Stunning. For a moment, everyone was speechless, especially Dongzhuo's eyes lit up. Such a divine will be under my command, may I ask who in the world can resist? Under the gaze of everyone, Lu Bu walked slowly towards the southeast corner with heavy and steady steps. Unlike Huaxiong, Lu Bu's every foot was particularly calm, his strength did not leak, and the floor he stepped on was also intact. Huaxiong, who was originally impressive, looked at Lu Bu, who looked like a divine general descending to the mortal world. A hint of pride also turned into pain, and his eyes were filled with disappointment and decadence, ultimately turning into a deep admiration. The previous enmity between the two also dissipated here. However, the many Western Liang generals around Huaxiong did not think so. Looking at the huge body in front of him, the shock in his eyes eventually turned into deep fear. In front of everyone's attention, Lu Bu still held the gilded three-legged cauldron with one arm, took a deep breath, and slowly lowered the cauldron in his hand with a serious expression. Dong! The heavy sound echoed around and could not dissipate for a long time. Okay. When Dongzhuo reacted, he slammed his thigh and exclaimed excitedly. At this moment, he couldn't even close his mouth with a smile. I also feel a sincere sigh in my heart. I have been on the battlefield for so many years and have seen countless top generals. However, even with the explosive power of his arms in his prime, he could only lift such a large cauldron, let alone easily lift it with one arm like LV Bu. This kind of thing is probably only achievable by legendary figures, but I didn't expect people today to have the same strength. In ancient times, there was a hegemon holding a cauldron, which could be considered invincible in the world. However, now we have LV Fengxian holding a cauldron with one arm, which is no less imposing than the hegemon Xiang Yu in the past. Excited, Dongzhuo nodded continuously to the surrounding generals. Lu Bu took a step forward and clasped his fists, saying, no matter how brave Bu is, he is just a person's courage. And Dong Gong, you are like that ancestor, shining brightly on all the people of the world. Although this flattery was rough, it made Dongzhuo feel incredibly sincere. What kind of person is Gaozu Lu Bang? He was a powerful ruler who laid the foundation for the 400 years of the Han dynasty. Dongzhuo compared Lu Bu to Xiang Yu in the past, but Lu Bu believed that Dongzhuo was the ancestor. No matter how strong Xiang Yu was, in the Battle of Gaixia, he was ultimately defeated by Emperor Gaozu. Lu Bu's move today is actually saying that no matter how strong he is, it is impossible for him to reveal the palm of Dongzhuo's hand. Dongzhuo helped LV Bu up and laughed excitedly, saying, our family has a leader. Who in the world can match us? After speaking, Dongzhuo looked around the Western Liang generals with a serious expression, his tiger eyes resembling a cannibalistic posture. Anyone who is scanned by Dongzhuo feels a chill in their heart. Looking at the military generals around obediently, Dongzhuo suddenly burst into laughter. As Dongzhuo's wild and unrestrained laughter echoed through the camp, the generals of Xiuyang looked respectful and said in unison, congratulations, Lord, on obtaining this divine general. At the end of the competition, Dongzhuo led LV Bu to inspect the entire Beta camp. Whenever he saw something inappropriate, LV Bu would speak frankly. Dongzhuo's face was full of smiles, but the generals of the Western Liang who followed closely all looked increasingly dissatisfied. Li Ru followed behind, his eyes constantly observing Lu Bu, who was out of place with the generals of the Western Liang, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. What he and Dongzhuo want is this effect. If LV Bu is an unparalleled loyal and righteous person who can get along well with his colleagues, coupled with his extraordinary strength, how can Dongzhuo feel at ease when he is placed by his side? Lu Bu's rebellious personality is now evident without doubt. Although he is loyal and treats his subordinates with brotherly affection, he is as aloof as a wolf. Now that he has been isolated, there is also a hint of joy in Dongzhuo's eyes, and he feels more and more at ease in his heart. After returning from Beidang, Lu Bu tirelessly returned to his mansion. Upon entering the mansion, Fang called Zhang Liao and others into his study. Before they could speak, Lu Bu told them everything that had happened today in advance. Zhang Liao and several others all knew how strong LV Bu was, and although they were somewhat surprised by the fact that he was carrying the cauldron, it was still within their expectations. But Wei Su had some disagreement with Lu Bu's approach. Nowadays, the Bingzhou army and the Xianyang army are still in a passionate relationship, and both sides are maintaining a situation where the well water does not invade the river. But Lu Bu's actions were equivalent to tearing apart his face from the Western Liang army. Nowadays, they rely on others, and if this continues, their situation will be extremely embarrassing. Therefore, as soon as Lu Bu finished speaking, Wei Su said, "Your Highness is acting in this way, isn't he putting himself in opposition to the generals of the Western Liang? At that time, they will secretly create obstacles, and what should we do?" Gao Shun is relatively honest, and because of this, even if he thinks there are problems with Lu Bu's arrangements, he will not ask too much. Zhang Liao understood LV Bu's heart the most and also understood what he was plotting for. Cao Xing was half of LV Bu's disciple and also his guide on the way to the army, demonstrating his loyalty. Lu Bu frowned slightly and looked at Wei Su, saying, "Today I am here to tell you that Dong Zhuo will inevitably be punished by heaven sooner or later. If you are with him, you will also die without a place to bury yourself. My lord knows this, why didn't we return to Bingzhou early?" Gao Shun's face suddenly showed a worried expression. Luoyang is the capital city of the great Han dynasty and a place of great opportunities in the future. Only here can we have the opportunity. If we quietly leave and return to Bingzhou now, although we can save our lives. Regardless of whether Dong Zhuo will let us leave or not, even if we go back, we will at most be dividing our territory and will not achieve great success. Upon hearing this, Zhang Liao's eyes flashed with a hint of brilliance, and he clenched his fists and asked, "Do you dare to ask the Lord about his aspirations?" LV Bu pondered for a moment and sighed, "If it were a prosperous era, I would be willing to be Hua Biao's cavalry, sweeping away the various tribes in the northern frontier and then feffing them as wolves." Unfortunately, after the Yellow Turban uprising, the world rose together, and there were also towering bandits like Dong Zhuo in the center. If this continues, the Han dynasty will surely perish. I admire Guangwu the most. Although I am a commoner, I have the ability to turn the tide and revitalize the Han dynasty. Bu 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 Kai, I am willing to hold a 3-foot sharp blade and create an era that belongs to our brothers. As soon as these words were spoken, the eyes of Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and others also changed. Lu Bu, with strength and courage, still has such great ambitions. Even if he cannot be the second highest ranking Emperor Guangwu, how can he still have a foothold in this chaotic era? Liao is not talented, willing to be sent by the Lord to go through fire and water without hesitation. The same goes for Gao Shun. Cao Xing beside him also quickly expressed his position, except for Wei Su who was a bit slow. Lu Bu only glanced at him and then said, "After today's event, the generals of the Western Liang dynasty will inevitably have resentment in their hearts. When Yuan and Bo Ping, you two strictly command your brothers not to conflict with them. Obey me." Zichu. Lord, Cao Xing's eyes were filled with excitement. Starting from today, Zichu quietly recruited some beggars and refugees from Luoyang to inquire about the situation between various prefectures in Luoyang, especially the Dong and Yuan prefectures. Zichu understands. After arranging the 3 of them, LV Bu asked them to leave first, leaving only Wei Su. The atmosphere in the room suddenly seemed a bit oppressive, and Wei Su seemed to notice the unfriendly feeling on LV Bu's body. He lowered his head and dared not look directly. Lu Bu let out a deep sigh in his heart. If it weren't for the lack of manpower around him, Wei Su would really only be able to play the role of a soy sauce player. But after all, he still has some kind of kinship with himself. Even though he has limited vision and poor abilities, at least he is still doing it for himself. After careful consideration, Lu Bu still planned to give him a job. Ziji, you can't continue to stay in Luoyang. Upon hearing this, Wei Su's eyes widened and his lips trembled slightly as he said, Brother. Law, I. Lu Bu waved his hand and took out a pre-written letter from the side, handing it to him. Although Luoyang is crucial, Bingzhou is our stronghold. We have enough support from Wen Yuan and his team here. You can go back to Taiyuan first, give the letter to your wife, and take care of everything at home for me. Wei Su breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. He was not skilled in military and political governance, but when it came to these trivial matters within his family, he believed he could still handle them well. Don't worry, brother. In law. I will take good care of Bingzhou and wait for you to come back soon.